Hi, and welcome to this section on installing and using an editor. I'm pretty sure all of you will have installed and used an editor at some point in your life already, but I remember that when I came to DevOps from an infrastructure background, there were a number of features of real developer editors that I hadn't come across as an infrastructure engineer, so I thought it would be really useful to just go over a few of these here, just in case you haven't seen them before. We're going to be using Visual Studio Code for this, which is one of the big players, but Sublime and Atom are also great. Feel free to pick whatever you want. They've all got a pretty similar feature set that we're going to cover now. So let's take a look at the install. A quick reminder again for anyone who's missed the previous sections, all these courses are done in Ubuntu running as a virtual machine on VirtualBox, and chapter 2 of my basics section covers how to get this going. Okay, first let's open a terminal here. Now we're going to need some dependencies for Visual Studio Code. I am going to type these in one by one here, but I do advise you to just Google install Visual Studio Code on Ubuntu, and you'll find all of the top 10 articles are going to give you these, and you can just copy and paste them right into your terminal if you don't fancy writing them out by hand. I want to write them here just for completeness, so do feel free to type along if you want to. Okay, so first, sudo apt install software properties common, apt transport https, and wget, all generally useful in any case. Okay, accept the install. Now add Microsoft's GPG key using wget-q and the link to the key. Then finally pipe sudo apt key add dash. Though I'm not generally going to dive into Linux commands, it's worth mentioning that the vertical pipe means that the command to the left of its output is then used by the command to the right of it. Now, let's add the Visual Studio Code repository with sudo add apt repository. Now that's added, let's update apt to pick up the changes. And now finally we can install Visual Studio Code using apt. Now unlike git commands that we were looking at, you don't have to remember any of that. It's just a one-time thing to get our editor, so feel free to jettison that information from your mind as soon as we've installed it. Alright, and once it's finished installing, if we go and have a look in our applications now, we should be able to see Visual Studio Code. Let's open that up. It's automatically showing us some instructions here, but we've got this wonderful Lernard course to look at, so we don't need these. To properly demo the features of this beautiful new editor we have before us, we're going to need a bit of code to take a look at. Let's use our newly acquired Git skills that we learned in the last section to go and get an open source repository so that we've got some code to look at. So, open Firefox, browse to github.com, and then search once again for Nginx, which I've picked just because I know it'll be there. Then copy the git clone link. Okay, now let's open a terminal, and as we'll probably be downloading quite a lot of repositories over the course of these lessons, I'm going to make a special repos directory for them. Now, as we discussed in the last chapter, to download the repository, we're going to use git clone and then the repo link. Okay, there it is. Now if I list, I can see the Nginx repo is there, and if we look inside, we can see the same files as we saw on GitHub. Great. So the first thing I want to show you is the open folder concept. Those of you who are already developers will probably be like, what? That's a bit basic, isn't it? And yes, it is a bit basic, but to non-developers like I was, it's a new concept to open a whole folder at a time to work on, so I still think it's worth mentioning. So let's find our Nginx folder here and open it. Now we can see in the left-hand menu all our files that make up our code project displayed in one place at the same time, and we can easily switch between them just by clicking on them instead of having to keep opening individual files. Once open, they'll display in a tab in the top like this, so you can open lots at once if you like. If I choose nginx.conf here as an example of a file with a standard recognisable format, you can also see that the editor colours the code in conveniently different colours to make various aspects of the syntax stand out for clarity. This is called syntax highlighting. Every decent editor will do this by default, by guessing the language of the file based on its file ending. If the editor guesses wrong, or doesn't know, you can manually choose which language it should pick in the bottom right-hand corner of the file, like so. If you find that the language you want highlighted isn't there, then click on this icon in the left-hand menu, and you'll be presented with an extension search tool where you can download extra languages, along with a host of other handy tools and debuggers. Let's get hold of some decent DevOps languages that are going to be in this course now to test it out. We'll go for Terraform here, which we'll be looking at in the next chapter. You can see in the description it provides not only syntax highlighting, but linting, formatting and validation as well, this tool. And now let's go for Ansible too, as we'll be looking at that along with Packer in the chapter on configuration. Now we've downloaded those extensions, let's take a look at another feature, which is Git integration. Having just learned all those handy Git commands in the last chapter, it may come as something of a relief to you to learn that in fact you can use your editor to handle most Git operations if you prefer to. Personally, I prefer to practice using the command line at all times, for the same reason I occasionally throw myself down the steps of my cellar wearing a hazmat suit, because you never know when you'll need those skills in a hurry. But that being said, I know lots of great developers who prefer to use the GUI, and I won't judge you if you choose the same route. So, let's pick a file at random here and make some edits so we can see this at work. Here we go, doesn't matter what, just anything so that Git detects a change. Now, as soon as I save, you can see this blue number has appeared next to the version control icon in Visual Studio Code. If I click on the icon, you can see that the change to the nginx.conf file has been detected. And if I click on that file, you can see a comparison between the original file and the change I've made. I love this feature. It's such a time saver when you're working on loads of things at the same time and you can't remember exactly what it is you did to this or that file, and it really helps me keep my work accurate and to the point. As before with Git, we can now commit this change to the Git timeline, but now all we have to do is write our message in this box here and then click the arrow icon to make it commit. This message that's popped up is telling us that we didn't first stage the files when we did our commit, and it's offering to do it for us automatically. You can even make it automatically do that all the time if you're super competent, and you always want them all. If I pop to the terminal here to show you a Git status, you can now see that Git is declaring we're ahead of master by one commit, which of course is the commit we just made in Visual Studio Code. So it's done exactly the same thing as using git add-a git commit, but just with the GUI instead of the command line. You can change between branches by clicking in the bottom left of Visual Studio here on the branch name. It will always display the branch you're currently on, even if you've changed it in the terminal, it will automatically change in Visual Studio. And if you click on it, it will give you a list of available branches you can change to. I should say in the case of the nginx repo, it's also displaying the release tags, but don't worry about that for now, we'll cover those in a later chapter. Down the bottom here in this list, you can see the actual branches, and if we switch back to the command line, you can see that they match the branches if we use our trusty git branch a command from the last chapter. Okay, one last quick feature to look at, as we're currently switching between VScode and the command line quite a bit. If we want, we can open a terminal right here in Visual Studio Code, using the new terminal option from the terminal menu. It will always open the terminal at the path of the folder you have open, and if we do a quick git status here, you can see that it's confirming the same as it did before in the normal terminal. I actually quite like using this, as it keeps everything nice and tidy in one window, but it's totally up to you. Alright, we've made it through to the end of that nice short section. In the next section, we're going to take a look at spinning up a cloud server in AWS for those of you that have never done it before, which will nicely prepare us for moving on to the next chapter where we take a look at doing the same thing with code in Terraform. So, hopefully see you there.